back. Now it's time for 40 minutes of panel before we break off for a break and then going down to the different stages. I have with me Salla, Alberto, Kjell, and Mats today. I will not even try to introduce you because you're so much better on doing it yourself. So before starting, let's have a round of introductions. Kjell?
Kjell Carlson, a pleasure to be speaking with you guys again. I'm Head of Data Science Strategy and Evangelism at Domino Data Lab.
That was short.
I could say that, yes, as I mentioned yesterday, was an industry analyst covering the data science, machine learning, and AI space for 4 years and have written on everything from AutoML to MLOps to responsible AI and so on and so forth.
See, aren't you happy that he told you that? Hi, everyone. I'm Salla. I'm the Vice President of Data Analytics in customer domain in IKEA. So my team works with all kinds of customer-facing data analytics solutions, so both machine learning and more sort of analyst stuff. And I'm super happy to be here.
So, hello everyone. Happy to be here. And my name is Alberto Barroso. I'm Global Head of Decision Science in Tetra Pak. So I lead a team of data scientists. And basically my experience, I have been working in this industry of data science for about 19 years. I'm a PhD in applied economics, so I'm more like into the scientific part of it. And I'm happy to share experiences here.
So, hi everyone, I'm Mats Delvall, as you previously saw on the stage. But I work at Snowflake, what we call a field CTO for data science. So I go around the EMEA, talk with customers, and help them to figure out how they can utilize data in a better way for their data science projects.
Great. Thank you so much for the introductions. I thought we'd start off with an easy question. So we have a question sent in. The best tip of turning a non-data-driven organization to one being fully driven by data. I know it's a very generic one, but what we're looking for is a discussion. Alberto, you have gone full circle because you are head of decision science, not data science. So I think we'll start with you because I think the way of doing it is very interesting.
I think you're pointing to something already. So I will start with 3 tips. I will start with the first one, which is basically try to understand your corporate strategy. So basically, try to understand what is the main goal of the organization and try to build a set of, decision challenges. We call it decision challenges. It's basically what are the key decisions or core decisions for the company. Based on that, I will move into the second advice. It's more like, build yourself a process. Build yourself a process to explain what is the steps across this, data science. For us, actually, this process, it's more about, the toll gates. Exactly what is exactly the value that we can prove. I have been myself using ChrisDM for about now 15 years. And when I realized that ChrisDM is basically a way to explain scientific method, then I realized that after that I need to use something called deployment step and something called servicing step, because we need actually to get a service going and we need to create models at the scale. But recently, and after doing my PhD, is that I recognize the more important part of this process is actually to enable facts. Instead of just data, we are moving to a direction of fact-based decisions. So how we can ensure that our AI services are actually adding value. So that's my second advice. Get yourself a process, focus on value realization, and make yourself sure about what you're delivering is true. And my third advice, just to conclude, is more about start small with some specific use cases and try to build the narrative of value and try to get yourself into the influencing mode.
Great, thank you. Salla, do you agree?
Yes.
Next, now. Any other advice or insights?
Yeah, I think so. Having done sort of data science in banking and now in furniture, I can see kind of a lot of commonalities. For me, one of the most important things is always talking about the value that you're creating. and really not making it sound complicated, because we all know that the tech stack is complicated, getting access to the data, understanding the quality, all of that will take time, but the business people and the people that you're working with really won't care. And I'm going to shamelessly plug the speaker from yesterday, Serena from IKEA, who talks a lot, who had a really nice speech about sort of design thinking being infused into what you do. And having worked at IKEA now for over a year, that's kind of one of my major takeaways. Like, go really close to your experienced designers, because they will be able to tell a story that I, as a data person, cannot. I always make really ugly PowerPoint slides. I sort of am learning how to not be technical when I'm speaking. But really, the creative designers can help you to paint the story and to explain to your sort of stakeholders and your people that you're working with what it is you're trying to achieve. And that can really sort of, it can spark a lot of joy, and it can really sort of, it can do some good expectation management if you do those stories together.
Great. Kjell, what do you say?
I guess I would add from as an external viewer, so what you're saying is exactly what you should be doing if you're as the data science practitioner or the data science leader within the organization. But from the outside, what strikes me is just a lack of leadership at the most senior levels who understand data science and machine learning. And without that kind of executive support and that ability to butt heads and the ability to align across different stakeholders in the organization, it's really, really difficult to get things done. So I guess if you have the choice of where to be, I would look for organizations, if you are a practitioner, which have a strong and empowered leader at a very senior level, again, who understands and recognizes what needs to be done, because your ability to go in and be able to contribute to a data-driven organization is going to be so much larger at that kind of organization.
Can
I was like, how do you find those?
No, start there.
Sala, please go.
No, because I'm just thinking, yes, that's great if you have that, but some organizations are really not hierarchical. So you might actually find places where the teams are super empowered to sort of create their own stories and to tell them to the highest management. And that can also be really an interesting dynamic. Where you don't really need that sort of lead sponsor fighting your way, but the teams themselves can kind of have the autonomy to do cool stuff and to create their own stories.
Absolutely. Oh, I fully agree with you on that. And there's an element of a self-reinforcing cycle of success, breeding additional trust, and so on and so forth. But I usually find at the end of the day, there was some executive at the senior level who was at least open to it and kind of understood it and knew to nurture it and was curious to learn about it, and that was able to be engaged in it versus taking a very hands-off approach and saying, hey, let this organically grow and we'll see what works. But
we have to put it into a context. Going from a non-data-driven, usually are the traditional structures, going to a data-driven, start enabling the teams to be more autonomous. So I think it's where, if you have nothing, you need one sponsor at least to start with to get things going.
Yeah.
Mats, I want to let you into the discussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with all that has been said, and I think it's, if you don't have stakeholders and sponsorship, it's going to be really hard. But I also think, as said, that focus on business value, not so much on technology and getting it completely right from the beginning, because it's important to prove that it brings something to the table that can be useful, and you have to do it rather quickly in order to get the focus and keep the focus. Because everything else can be handled later on. But if people don't see the value of what you're doing, it's kind of hard to be expected to continue to do it.
Well, adding to this, I think that it's very tempting to start with, either we start with the data, or we'll start with the data science team, or we'll start with a business use case. And in the wonderful realm of data science, you can't do that. It's perfectly conceivable that your business use case that you want to go after is not doable because the methods and the data doesn't support it. It's perfectly conceivable that the methods actually are just not sufficient, and it's definitely frequently the case that the data just doesn't support things. So there's an element whereby you have to iterate on all three parts of that triangle, the data, the methods, and the business use case simultaneously. So you're asking to be not just data-driven, but also machine learning model-driven and also business-driven simultaneously. And thinking about all three of those from the very get-go is difficult, but ultimately slightly improves your chances of success, I would say.
So we actually had a presentation, and I think, Salla, you mentioned it briefly yesterday, AI by design, who was thinking about design thinking as a concept before going into all of this aspect, which was a super interesting concept as well. So Alberto, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it was more a remark about the question. I think, and to my point about we are moving from, I think, data-driven decisions to fact-based decisions. I mean, data itself can be noisy and can be biased. So I think the mindset of the organization needs to move to, understanding scientific method, understanding the ground base of the truth. And that takes a lot of, I would say, humbleness approach. It needs to be, it's not just about who is at the top of the organization. It's about the culture. It's about, experimentation and learning from failure. It's really difficult for humans. Even as a data scientist, we get biased. We get biased to our own solutions. So I think that's a change also in the organization needed and the culture.
No, I agree. So let us move then towards business value, because we were already discussing that. As data scientists, it's quite easy to discuss accuracy, F1 score, and optimization and output. But how do we move from that discussion into optimizing maybe the value aspects? Maybe not in the context of the entire thing, but maybe in the context of a stakeholder. Salla, what do you say?
Well, I think, so I'm super into this design thinking thing, just because I like, for me at least, it's been a bit of a mindset shift. So instead of coming and talking about technical solutions or, of course, value creation is what we're talking about, and that's kind of number one, but doing it through sort of showing dreams. I think is super cool, because it flips it from something scary and, oh no, now it's going to be super expensive, etc. It flips it into something like, oh, that's really cool, and I can somehow, finding like the human aspect on how you can relate to it. Yes, but then I think as AI or ML practitioners, I think taking the time to really understand the kind of business problem that you see a potential of solving, and trying to do some sort of a quantification of the value that you're going to bring, and then being super open about it's probably completely wrong, but it's at least like probability 50% that it's going to be okay. I think it's still sort of numbers stick with people. I think you were saying that at some stage, that you can tell that society is becoming a bit more data-driven because people actually use numbers. And that is something quite new. So if you can then also sort of insert we expect that this is going to bring this value, that appeals to everyone.
I agree. Shell, your point of view?
It's one of those things where it'd be wonderful if there was a silver bullet, and if it was just like a very easy formula that you could use in order to go from from like an F1 score over to business value. Obviously, it does not exist. I think there's just hard work and a lot of assumptions that you have to put into it. But I would highlight the importance of measuring that value at multiple different levels, and doing it from the level of model accuracy, F1 score, et cetera, all the way up through to that end bottom line business metric. The process of doing so will often give you insight as to where you're out of whack. And it's one of those things where usually F1 score was never the best objective function to be maximizing. There are very few business problems that actually align to a lot of these very stereotypical basic model accuracy scores that we use. I mean, it's the that perpetual example of, we can all create a model that predicts with 99.99% accuracy terrorism. You just predict that there's never terrorism. Or that, there's a model out there which has 50.1% accuracy that's super valuable, if you could build it, which would be a model that predicts whether or not I should take the next card in blackjack. If I had a 50.1% accurate model that did that, I'd be rich beyond my wildest dreams. And so often folks don't really know what that is when they start, or how to align those metrics at those different levels. And so that process of figuring out what is that value, what is the objective function at those different levels, can give you an idea of whether they're out of whack.
Mats?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end it's also about understanding, I mean, the drivers and what is good enough for the business. I think sometimes we over-focused on getting the best out of everything and being as accurate as possible, where, as you said, like from a business perspective, 51.5% is good enough, because today we only do 45%. So also understanding how much effort you need to use to bring additional value, I think that will guide us a little bit better and also be able to deliver a little bit faster. And it's all about, I mean, benchmark where we are today, talk with the business and understand, get the domain expertise in to say, well, this is what I want, this is good enough for me, this will make my life easier. You don't have to solve every problem I have, but these two things are very important for me, because that can drive you to a better direction in that sense. And I think sometimes we miss that.
Alberto, the value of facts.
I'm very biased because I'm coming from management consulting, and we always talk about something called ASIS and to be. That's what we talk all the time. My 2 cents on that is that you need to understand the process of decision making, understand your current descriptive context in model in the performance of your decision before entering into any kind of quantitative modeling. Really understand what is exactly the impact of your decisions, and that can be really hard to understand. But you need to build that understanding with your main decision stakeholders. I mean, that's the starting point, and it needs to be grounded and signed off with some kind of fire. And then every time I talk about model performance, for example, a classifier, I don't talk about F-score. I talk about net value. Or I'm not talking about forecast accuracy. I talk about working capital reduction, for example. So I think that conversation is basically important, because if not, we cannot really connect with the stakeholders. We cannot connect with business. That would be my 2 cents.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want to change topic a little bit, maybe a little bit more sensitive. There are a lot of very good software companies out there. I know you to know that. There's a question from the audience or from the participant from last year's that has a recommendation on the analytical ecosystem. They want to make sure that they don't get vendor lock-in, but still being able to use the best of breeds. Do you have any recommendation how to avoid vendor lock-in in the market to make them a little bit more at ease to try out new software and buy licenses, etc.? Maybe a little bit open question, but in the end of the day, we all want all the companies and customers to be super satisfied and not being there because they have to, right? So should we start from the industry sons, Sala?
Sure. It's a very open question.
I know. I like open questions.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, in general, I think really seeing to it that you use microservices so that you're not sort of using monolith solutions, please. This is my personal opinion, by the way. And then using as many APIs as you can so that the integration is as simple as possible. And really sort of trying to keep all the business logic very clean and well documented, so that if you do have to migrate from one place to another, you're clear with this microservice is serving this purpose, and when we change it, we can change it in this way. So when you build, have that in mind. Because it is a super important topic, especially in the current landscape where we still have a lot of sort of monolith providers.
Yeah. Kjell?
I guess I would point to, I think the Lean Six Sigma folks have this concept of value-add complexity versus non-value-add complexity. So this is one of those areas where there's a lot of value in best of breed and having multiple options. For example, at the most simple level of the productivity of your data scientists, being able to enable them with the tools that they actually know how to use and are trained on. But there's an awful lot of non-value-add complexity in this, and where we're just quite literally duplicating, creating administrative headwork, creating additional barriers between collaboration in the organization. So it's easier said than done, but going in and maximizing your value-add complexity and minimizing your non-value-add complexity is the way to go. But again, yeah, easier said than done, and it's a constant ongoing effort.
Alberto?
So I would say that connecting with the process I think that if you have a very strong process when you are basically moving across, your fact-based journey, you understand basically what are the tools, what are the services that you're using. So I think in general, this is one advice. And then the second element, I think, is that you need to use standards for, like, best practice for coding. Right? That's for sure. I mean, and independently of what type of provider you're using, if you're using that, then you are somehow safe. Now, there is a caveat here. We are moving more towards AutoML, cognitive services, transfer learning models, and that's adding a level of complexity, and you're getting also trapped into specific vendors, and that's a risk that I see in the future, of course. But coming back to the point, we need to open that black box. I mean, this is something that at least if we use vendors for example, AutoML, we really need to understand exactly what they are providing. So AI transparency is key there.
Mats, what do you think?
Well, representing a vendor, so no, but I think it's a valid question, and I think that's something we do discuss with our customers as well. I mean, and I think it's down to standards, as said, that make sure that what you're using is following open standards. Make sure that you know the implications of using something. I mean, there's always a trade-off, what you get and what you don't get. But having that and make sure that you know what is your exit plan, what is the effort needed if we want to migrate away from something. How can we get the data out? In what format can we get it? Can we store it in a specific format that can be used, and so on? I think it's more like having standards, having a process for it, and understand the implications of each and every vendor, what we gain and what we lose. And then you have to take the trade-off as saying, do I want to have more complexity, less complexity? Where do I want to end up in that?
Great. Albert, I want to go back to one thing. You mentioned AutoML and the new tooling. We start seeing them being more and more used. They used to be quite bad, but now they're achieving at least some decent performance. Maybe you can explain a little bit how you see potentially AutoML being used in organizations and the downfalls with it and potentially the potential of it.
Mm-hmm. So our approach has been basically starting with the definition of some of potential use cases that we had already built, by the way, with code, to have some kind of baseline. So we wanted to understand what could be the potential of using AutoML for new people, especially junior data scientists, people that are initiating into the world of machine learning. And here we started with a hypothesis. This could be maybe reducing 10, 20% the POV, the proof of value time. So we picked basically 3 use cases, and we started to compare apples to apples when it comes to use cases, because every use case is different, we can say, but there are some commonalities. So we picked, for example, a use case about supply chain, where typically you have time series regression models, and then you have basically the challenges of backtesting with holdout samples. And you realize that there are not so many AutoML solutions with these specific features. But we have something. We compare, and we pick some initial vendor, and then we pick another one, which was basically a classifier. Typical image recognition problem. That was actually simple compared to the supply chain problem. I think in general, I agree that AutoML could bring some speed. I think that there is, as I mentioned before, the challenge actually is to get an understanding of what is, how to really trust the model. So really understanding basically, what are my backtesting results? How can I, understand the causality of specific features? So I think that's something that it has to be really, has to resonate for the software providers. Yeah. If not, I won't be able to actually pick any software about this. Yeah.
So I'm just picking up on this, that then AutoML and these type of toolings still require you to know what you're doing, so it's not an enabler for a larger mass of people yet. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so. There are some specific examples, like more like AutoML with some kind of visual frameworks, like kind of point and click and these things. But yeah, I think you need to understand the problem. You need to define your use case first. That's a must-have. Yes.
Sala.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you. Good moderator. No, and I completely agree with you. And I also, I try to sometimes think about sort of what are the core assets that this organization that I'm working in really should own and understand deeply, and then what things are kind of probably good enough with off-the-shelf solutions, and we wouldn't care if our competitor does exactly the same. And then there's also the super exciting part, which is where can we collaborate across organizations? So when I was working at SEB, we noticed that sort of the language models for Nordic languages are not really awesome from the big providers. So we really tried to sort of understand how we could start collaborating across organizations and with academia. And that's such an exciting area where you find these sort of things that, like, no financial institution, very few companies would want to be the best at natural language processing. But if we can do it together, then we can actually create something that's really sort of beneficial for society. So yeah, sort of the really core intelligence and components that you need for your company, and then the things where you probably don't want to be best, but you just need something that works. And then the parts where you could actually be giving back to society. Those are kind of at least 3 areas that I've identified and that I kind of try to keep top of mind to understand where we should be sort of focusing.
Great. Shell?
I guess I would add to this that AutoML is a little bit like a solution, and we're trying to figure out what the problem is. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind or in most people's mind that it is extremely powerful and it should be really useful. We're just trying to figure out how it would be useful. And the way that it's often been sold is in some sort of, oh, we're going to replace the data scientist, or everybody's going to become a data scientist. And that was never true. And it wasn't true from early on, yet people still steadfastly kept on with that narrative and still keep on with that narrative today. It's one of those things where I think I wrote, I believe, the first evaluation of standalone AutoML vendors back in, well, it was only 2019, it wasn't that long ago. And I was trying to find an example of that. Okay, is there one bona fide example where you gave an AutoML tool to a data analyst or business user, and it actually drove significant business value? And I found one. It was a philanthropic or a agency that serves like the Red Cross and things like that. And it was like, well, they were able to bring all their lead scoring models in-house, and there were no data scientists there. But there was a data scientist over at the vendor who guided them and trained them how to use it, and who validated what the models were and other things like that. So even that one example wasn't true. So again, I don't want to poo-poo AutoML. I think it is incredibly powerful, and there are ways in which probably we all should be using it in every project we do, if nothing else for discovery, or maybe some feature discovery or something in that way. We're just not selling it that way, and people are not messaging it that way, and people are thus getting the wrong impression as to what it's good for. Sorry.
So
my soapbox.
So I'm trying to assess this as well then. So we should see AutoML, and I'll let you in a second, but maybe at this stage it's something that can support the development process to speed it out, make it more efficient, but still requires the skill set of a trained data scientist or the person that actually knows what they are doing. Good. Mats?
No, I mean, you summarized what I wanted to say. So, I mean, it's just another tool in the data scientist toolbox, and I mean, so far they are not for the business users, because you still need to know all the measurements and the statistics and in order to evaluate and understand why this model was behaving so much better than the other one. Otherwise, you're just going to go point and click and say, wow, this is 99%, and then let's deploy it, and it doesn't do anything useful for it. So I think you summarize it pretty well, but my view on it is.
And I wanted to pick up on Ulrika's from Ericsson, her picture around the ML, that's the small part. So I mean, that's one part we need to address, and then we have all the other parts as well, what happens afterwards. Good. We have about 10 more minutes, and now I want to be a little bit more predictive. I'm not bad at that, I hope. But I want to talk about the trends in the industry. So AutoML is one thing, but what are some of the other topics that we're seeing popping up now? Mats, you can start this time.
Oh, thank you. But I come from a data company, and I mean, for us, the trend is about, I mean, it's more and more focus on data and also to focus about getting more external data and work together around that. I think it's also in the way how we can collaborate with different organizations and utilize the data together, especially in ML, where we can get new insights, or we can be seeing a better way of boost the performance by allowing to use external data from similar companies. But as I was speaking on before, we're not exposing the privacy things. So at least that is what we see companies is going more and more that. How can we utilize others' data in a better way in order to boost performance and finding new ways of getting more insights?
So sharing and a bit of privacy and just getting data more used, you would say, is coming more?
I think so. I mean, we do have everybody has a lot of data internally, and we have been quite good or reasonable good at utilizing and at starting to work with it. But we also see more and more realize that others has data that is very interesting for me, that if I can have access to it, it actually will improve what I'm doing. I can get a better understanding. And especially, I mean, in different where we can, as a retailer, I can collaborate with my suppliers so they can be better at filling my warehouses and more in time if I'm able to share and collaborate around that. And I think that is going to be, at least as we see, a big driver.
Interesting. Alberto, what do you see?
I see the transfer learning as one of the key trends. It's like, you are going to have bigger and more powerful models, and they will be available at the cloud. I think that's interesting. I think this is going to be an opportunity and a risk. So I think, transfer learning, I mean, we have seen this, last release of this, GP4. Now it's, like 500 times, the previous one is like, that's just crazy. And when it, I think second trend I see is that connected to that is like the need for AI transparency. So we are going to see more auditing of models, more requirements. There will be legal requirements for transparency. So this is something that, if we use these big models, we need to be prepared actually to open all these black boxes and to have external peer-to-peer review. I think that's important because, data is biased and big models are biased, and we need to get ourselves into that. And the third trend I see is sustainability and the use of AI for sustainability challenges. I think this is one of the key. I mean, for us, sustainability is at the core of our company strategy. We have probably the most challenging objective we have ever put in the history of Tetra Pak, which is basically, being net zero in 2025. We are going to be that, pretty sure. But we need actually to cut in half, for 2030, the total CO2 emissions of the value chain. That's huge. That is really difficult. And I think that AI, in that sense, is going to be fundamental.
Nice. Now I feel like mine are really stupid. So I agree with him. So I mean, on a more technical perspective, I think completely agree that and I've been sort of thinking a lot in my personal time about federated models. This makes me sound really weird, but I think it's really linked to kind of the privacy aspect and the increasing awareness of our citizens, which is great. That they actually should care about their privacy, and I think federated learning can be a really good way of sort of being sure that I don't even need to share my data if I don't I can just share maybe some parameters where I'm sure that I'm not sharing information, which is a tough cookie to crack. And then the other one is differential privacy, so really being able to use data in ways that are truly privacy preserving. So I'm a mathematician, and this is actually mathematically provable that you're not able to identify individuals. So that really sort of resonates, of course, with my little math heart, but also I think it increases a lot the opportunities for us. And then my third one is very connected to transparency, because I agree regulations are coming, which is good, but we can probably even do better. So IKEA always wants to be different with the meaning, and that's definitely an area where we have high ambitions. And we've been talking a lot about like what is transparency? Like how can you really express to your customer, for instance, what it is you're actually doing? And I'm like a broken record. That's where you need to talk to your experienced researchers, because they will know and they will help you to find the right wordings so that it's actually understandable, so that you can sort of clearly in simple terms explain what you've been doing with the data of the person, and so that it's not sort of, because I could explain like, we use this model and then, but that's not going to resonate with a normal human being. So really understanding like how can we make you experience transparency, I think is a super interesting challenge, and something that I think we can do and we should do.
You forgot one thing.
Oh.
Design thinking.
Oh yeah. Oh, true. Dang. It is actually.
Well, there's a bit of, well, ditto to what Alberto said, and ditto to what Sanna said, and again, ditto even to what Matt was saying there, because there are so many really, really exciting things that are happening. But there is also this element whereby the most exciting thing that is happening is that data science is getting really boring. From the point of view is that it's becoming normal, it's becoming less exceptional within organizations that we're speaking with. Folks are now putting into place all of those processes and have their teams at scale and are driving value. And I think that's the most exciting thing, is that data science is becoming a regular part of organizations and sort of becoming understood. That being said, I think when Mats, when you were talking about data clean rooms, I think the exciting opportunity I see there is, and I know that you're already including this in your concept of data clean rooms, but data science clean rooms, so that you're sharing the data, but you're also sharing all of the infrastructure and tooling and everything else that you need in order to be able to analyze that data and actually be able to create models from that data and deliver value from it. So I'm very excited about that part, because again, opening up that collaboration, not just at the sharing of the data, but also that collaborative effort around the analysis and development of solutions around that data, I think will be extremely powerful if and when we actually are able to do it.
So I'm picking up a trend here. The theme of the conference is towards human-centered AI, and that is pretty much what I would like to summarize the topics you brought up, with a few exceptions. But it really sounds like we're now at a stage where it's not just mathematicians having the dialogue on how a good model looks like. It is actually starting to become society. In society. And I think this is an interesting discussion. So we have 2 more minutes, and I love reading. So can I just ask all the participants, starting with you, Kjell, I'm putting you on the spot, give me a book recommendation.
Well, I would hate to say it, but I would go back to traditional strategy books. I'd go back to Clay Christensen's, not The Innovator's Dilemma, but The Innovator's Solution, because there are just so many practical, useful things that he doesn't mention data science or machine learning or AI once in that entire book, at least I'm pretty sure that he doesn't, but so many of the things are relevant to all of the projects that we have today. And so I would go back and look at the better of the strategy textbooks or canon of strategy canon, and see what is powerful and impactful for you.
Thank you. Sala?
Harvard Business Review has a book about transformation. I think it's called it's either Transformation 2.0 or Driving Change 2.0 or something like that. There's a 2.0 in it. But it's really nice. It's a collection of articles about how you actually can transform organizations. Because the more I work with kind of data science, the more I'm aware that it's actually plain vanilla transformation that we're trying to achieve. So there is a lot of really interesting concepts that you can get inspired from. Yes.
Amazing. Alberto?
Just to pick a book is difficult. I will pick one. It's Robert Shelley. It's called Narrative Economics. It has to do with how narratives are spread. He won a Nobel Prize. And I think it's super connected to how to sell and influence.
Yeah.
And then I will also, like a bonus, I will add a paper.
Okay.
A paper that was released in Nature in 2020 by a group of scientists, politicians, and government organizations around the standards evidence for decision making, which I found it's extremely to the point of AI transparency.
Perfect. Mats.
Wow, that
10
was
seconds.
putting me on the spot. Yeah. So I don't read that much on strategy books, so I can just recommend the latest. Novel I read was the Fireman of Joe Hill. So it's just a horror book, but it was really great. I do recommend it. It's about the pandemic, and it was really nice. That's what I'm doing to relax.
I like the diversity in results. That's the best thing. So that comes to the end of the panel. Please give the panelists a warm round of applause. And we now have a networking break. So at 11, we'll start with the scenes again, the same setup as yesterday. Thank you so much.